Good morning, everybody. I hope that you're interested in open data, and if that's the case, you're in the right room. If not, the other session is going to be held in room number 1. There has been a change in the room. Good morning, everybody, and my name is Barbara Ubaldi, and I work at the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development in Paris. And the reason why I'm here is because I have been asked to moderate a great panel of speakers who will be sharing with us a little bit their view and experience on working with open data to favor the development of smart destinations. What does it mean? In our perspective, open data is something that does not bring value simply because data is being opened up by governments, for instance, on a portal, but the value comes from the fact that through collaboration, through sharing, through reuse, the data become solutions and products that can bring value for those who develop the products, but also for those who consume the products. So the really interesting focus of the session today is going to be to try to understand what kind of value does open data bring for the touristic industry, for those who are part of it as active producers, but also for all of us who are consumers of touristic services. Without further delay, I will introduce the panelists before leaving them the floor, starting with Davis Adieno. Davis is the Africa Regional Manager of the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data. He's based in Nairobi, Kenya, and works with governments, regional bodies, non-state actors, private sector and organizations, and other organizations through national data roadmap processes to define strategies that support their priorities for investment and innovation in data. He champions the harnessing of the data revolution for effective sustainable development at various levels by supporting and bringing together multiple stakeholders to develop inclusive information ecosystems that support data sharing and use. Juan Jose Hierro, he's the Chief Technology Officer and Chairman of the Fireware Technical Steering Committee, a foundation where he focuses on open source initiative with the mission to build an open sustainable ecosystem around public, royalty-free, and implementation-driven software platform standards that ease the development of new smart applications in multiple sectors. Juanjo was one of the founders of the Open and Agile Smart Cities initiative, which aims at creating a digital single market for smart cities based on the adoption of common mechanisms enabling portability and interoperability of services in cities. Antonio Fernandez Morte, is the marketing industry manager, channel and sectors, and he holds a degree in physical sciences from the Complutense University of Madrid and a postgraduate degrees in innovation management and big data analytics. He has spent most of his professional life in positions related to sales and marketing in Telefonica in the international environment. After collaborating with startups and SMEs in Spain, he works, as I said, as marketing industry manager at Esri Spain in collaborations with partners and alliances. And last but not least, joins the panel Martin Saltschek, I hope I was getting pronouncing the last name, who is the R&D director leading a team of people pursuing the shared vision of Outdoor Active to build a digital home for outdoor enthusiasts. Martin believes that the future challenge for mass destinations is to grow leadership that develops and drives inspiring visions and strategies for connecting locals and guests in a sustainable way. He sees digital technologies as enablers and proposes to join forces for building an open data infrastructure for tourism as a basis for innovation and new business models. I like the fact a lot that this panel has people representing different communities, because I think creating value out of open data is about bringing the ecosystem together. So without further delays, I would like to invite Davis to share with us shortly some thoughts from his experience.
Good morning. Good morning. That's better. Greetings from Africa. Greetings from Kenya. It's such a great pleasure to be here. Thank you to the UN World Tourism Organization and, of course, the wonderful people of Oviedo, Asturias, for hosting us here. I'll speak briefly about the relevance of open data for smart destinations. But I thought maybe before I go into the details of that, I should just quickly introduce where I come from. So where is the clicker? Do you have the clicker? Oh, camouflaged. This one. Okay. Yeah, so Jambo is what we say hello. So if I say Jambo, you say back Jambo. Jambo. Welcome to magical Kenya. As you can see, it's not very far from Spain on the map. That's where we are in East Africa. You can actually walk. The only problem is it will take you a couple of months and we'll welcome you in Kenya. That's our capital city. For those who may not know, we are popularly known for running marathons. We are global champions when it comes to marathons. Nairobi, our capital city, is the only capital city in the world with a national park. So you can see the lions, the elephants, the rhinos, the cheetahs, the leopards there. And for those who didn't know, I saw the photo of this man yesterday in a presentation, and I thought I should let you know that he's also Kenyan because his father was Kenyan. So it's a great nation, and you're welcome to, to visit us. The global partnership, really, where I work, is a global network that brings together stakeholders who are seriously thinking about leveraging data and technology to support the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And within the context of the data revolution, really, we are working to develop an ecosystem where governments, private sector, civil society, and other groups can work together to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. It was launched in September 2015, so we are not that old. And what we do is to support countries around the world and stakeholders across sectors to better harness the data revolution to achieve the SDGs. These are just but some of our global partners, and there are quite many. And I'll not go through that list. But if you visit our website, you can be sure that you will find a number of people that you may know. But it's not just about data. We're talking about data for action. And when you're talking about data, you have official data, you have official statistics. There are new sources of data, for example, geospatial data. There is privately held data. There is now the concept of citizen-generated data, which has really existed for a long time. It's only that it's now being formally recognized. And then we have open data. But what we believe is that more information, really, and better information should lead to better decisions. And I think the purpose here is to try and fill data gaps, provide real-time information that informs decisions, and both for official and non-official uses. And of course, think about innovative ways and approaches to bring stakeholders together to work together. These are the Sustainable Development Goals, for those who don't know them. And you can see Sustainable Development Goal number 11 is about sustainable cities and communities. But when I looked at them last night, I realized that almost all the SDGs really need to apply to smart destinations. So in the absence of having good quality education, tackling issues of poverty, water and sanitation, life below water, life above water, and having partnerships, then you cannot talk about a smart destination. So we have to think about an integrated approach, to work collectively across sectors and then bring them together as we think about smart destinations. What are areas that I think can benefit from open data? I think we need to start thinking about deriving insights from new sources of data. And now we have Earth observation and satellite data that's coming into the fold. Like I mentioned, citizen-generated data. What is it that the communities are talking about? What is their daily experience? And how does that then translate into somebody who's coming to visit the area to share that experience? There's big data, especially mobile phone data. In Kenya, for example, we are pioneers of money, mobile money. So if you know about an application called M-Pesa, I can basically send money, to my grandmother while I'm here. I can, withdraw money from my account. I can pay for groceries for people back at home while I'm here, just through my mobile phone. So innovation and the use of handheld devices, I think, is going to be the next frontier. But when we talk about open data, it's not just about open data, but it's providing fascinating facts and figures. And I'll use the dog bites man analogy. So if a dog bites someone in Oviedo, it will just be a story. But if there's a new story that a man actually beat a dog, then that would make news headlines. So how do we transform data and information into fascinating facts that then attract people to our destination. So it's a good thing to make data available, but transforming that open data into something that then attracts attention is a completely different job. And there are many different ways that we can do this. Now, with the click of a button, you can find information about practically any corner of the world. So we have to use the tools that we have, for example, mobile phones and the apps that are being developed on a daily basis, really, to enhance sharing, interactions, and people's experiences. I think that's absolutely important. And we have to think about what kind of data are we sharing. Open data must communicate important information. And important information does not always have to be serious. It has to be information that actually matters to people. Information that resonates with what people are thinking, and it attracts them to really look at it. As you think about open data, obviously we think about issues of open governance, but at the more official level of things, definitely open data is known to improve efficiency in the delivery of services, because the more you expose yourself by providing data and information, the more pressure there is from the public, because they interact with that information for you to do something to improve their own experiences. We have to think about smart destination policies, because policies are the most sustainable drivers of development. Within policies, you entrench past, current, and forward thinking to make sure that the sector is well managed. We have to also think about bringing citizens into the fold, and we've had this over the last 2 days. How do we engage with people more to ensure that, they effectively participate? Without open data, it's very difficult to measure impact, because you cannot measure what you don't know. And I think that's absolutely important. And also think about strategic positioning, which I think is critical. So where should we focus our priorities? Number one, I think that focusing for better planning and management. Open data is going to play an important role. So are we thinking about open data today, or data that was used yesterday, or are we looking at that data and looking into the future generations? So 50 years from now, or 100 years from now, when maybe, not all of us will be here, what will be happening to that destination? And that's the kind of forecasting sustainability model that we need to adopt, because it's good to attract people right now, but in the next 10 years, then what happens? Now, open data can help us to do that. And I think that's absolutely critical. Cutting edge and innovative solutions. We have to change. In the era of the data revolution, it's about changing mindsets and doing things differently, and thinking about new ways of doing things. So we have to think about the ways we are collecting data, for example, through mapping and crowdsourcing, which is basically reaching out to the public to share data and information in real time. So it's good to have the surveys, it's good to have the censuses, but you can actually get information even on social media. And I personally rely on Twitter to really understand what's happening at home, because I cannot access news channels on TV back at home when I'm here. But through Twitter, I can know exactly what's happening and at what point in Kenya. Think about ways of sharing data. And social media, like I've mentioned, is absolutely critical. And more people, like we learned yesterday, are spending time on social media apps. So we have to ensure that we communicate in ways that then harnesses some of these opportunities that are emerging. And then pushing content and marketing. Obviously, that's important. But when it comes to data, I think the bigger picture and the bigger incentive will be, if we are going to tell a good story, we must combine figures and statistics and the qualitative narratives that come from user experiences. Now, if we don't do that, what happens is that it's good to put figures out there and talk about, X number of visitors came, but out of those X number of visitors, how many of them actually really benefited, and how many of them really were satisfied by what they saw or experienced? So I think that's absolutely important. And of course, within that, you have issues around interoperability and of course, harnessing new sources of data. I think information is power if it's well used, because it's one thing to have information and totally different to another to actually effectively use it. But with informed decision making, we can translate into a changed distribution of wealth and power. I totally believe that, because on one hand, you have the power holders, you have the people who hold the data and the information. Now, once that data and information is put into the hands of people, their experiences change, they learn something new, and they find new ways of doing things. And for me, the key incentive is the collective and mutual benefit that can be derived from the willingness to open and share information, which is the work that we are here to do collectively as our partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. I have a question for you, because you mentioned two keywords when it comes to producing mutual benefits. You mentioned communities, and you mentioned the distribution of wealth. So the question I have for you is, how can we make the whole ecosystem around open data more inclusive so that opportunities can be captured by the many and not only by those who are already prepared and well equipped for using data to produce value for all?
Yeah, thank you very much for that fantastic question. I think when you're talking about inclusiveness, human beings tend to be very selfish. The first thing I think about is myself, me and I. So what is it that I am going to benefit? And that question always resonates, even for somebody who wants to go to a destination. The question is, what is it that I'm going to derive out of being in that destination? So we have to provide incentives. If we're talking about inclusion, you cannot talk about inclusion without incentives. And the incentive for people to participate or be part of a particular process is basically looking at how you can mutually benefit. So you're selling a product, you're selling a destination. My interest is to get away from all the traffic jams in Nairobi and come to Oviedo, which is a nice, quiet place. The incentive for me to travel from Kenya to come here, which is about 13 hours of straight travel, what would really drive me? So we have to think about that. And of course, when it comes to wealth distribution, it's always a matter of having systems, structures, processes in place that systematically build towards that, because you cannot do it overnight. That's the challenge that we face. So what are we doing today to ensure that tomorrow is better and that there is improvement in the way the wealth is being distributed?
Thank you very much. Just a very quick follow-up question. Oftentimes when we look at sustainability in the long run of the ecosystem, we also talk about skills. And I liked a lot your point about the storytelling, the narrative, what can we communicate with the data? And in your point of view, is there the necessity to develop skills of people within the ecosystem so that they are capable, not only in terms of technical perspective to open up the data, but to do something with the data so that they can tell a story of what they can offer to tourists, for instance?
Yeah, and that exactly speaks to the point about intermediaries. You have data providers and you have an audience that you want to target with that data. And not everyone can make sense of data. And we, of course, know that a lot of us, when presented with numbers, tend to run off in a different direction. So numbers, statistics are not very well received by the general public. So we need to have intermediaries. And the intermediaries then need to understand both sides of the demand and the supply. So who's providing the data? Where is it going? And then the person standing in between should be able to translate that data into information that can then be presented in a way that makes sense and in a language that makes sense to the recipients. I think often we assume that by just making data available or information available, then people are going to understand it. But most times you'll find that even as you present information, somebody wants to really see what is so interesting about it. And this is where visualizations, for example, come in, telling narratives. And I found this very interesting. When some years back we were conducting social audits and would present to the public that, for example, $1 million of public funds had been lost through, mismanagement. A lot of the people within the communities, local communities, could not understand. But when we told them that $1 million, it was equivalent to 1,000 herd of cattle, for example, or could actually build so many number of schools or classrooms, they would suddenly visualize that and get it. So the way you communicate the same information can really have an impact on whether people receive it or not. And I think that's absolutely important.
Thank you very much. I would like to invite Antonio to share with us some thoughts based on his experience.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Barbara, for introducing me. I would like to share with all of you what are doing right now ESRI with our customers and partners regarding big open data. First of all, I would like to share with you one impressive use case, Granada. Granada, as most of you know, is a stunning city, it's a beautiful city with two neighborhoods, call it Sacromonte and Albaicín, who are World Heritage. But Granada has an idiosyncrasy. It has many difficulties in order to walk around. This is I can see good, but this is a message of a person who has a wheelchair. And he said that it's very difficult to move around Granada. Granada has a lot of hills, as you can see in this picture, and has a lot of stairs with slopes, narrow streets, so it's very difficult to move around the city. And they need universal access. So one partner, called it EDOM, developed an application in order to move easier around the city. This application you can download in your desktop or in your mobile. You put the origin and destination of the road, and depending on your accessible profile, for instance, in this case, you can see if you are trekking, or you are a senior person, or you have low mobility using, for instance, a wheelchair. You can choose the origin and destination of your route around the city, Sacromonte and Albaicín. And the app shows you how is the optimal route in order to go from these points, depending on your mobility. As you can see, the app shows you too some interesting information, for instance, accessibility information, the total road, how long and how far is it, average slope, max slope uphill, max slope downhill, stairs is yes or not, and some interesting information, for instance, how is your floor, how is made it, how is the slope, the elevation, and you have some more information regarding interesting points around the road. For instance, in this case, bus stops, hotels, taxi parking, motorbike parking, very interesting information around it. Or you have a 3D visor in order to watch the different monuments that you can see in the road. But what happens if you link in, or you have a wheelchair? As you can see, the road have changed. The application chooses the optimal route in order to go from one point to other point. Is longer in this case, 1.0 kilometers and 22 minutes. But the elevation is the same. The average slope is lower, 7%. So the application offers to the person the better solution in order to go from these points. All apps are supported on ESRI's platform. But I would like to share with you, with all of you, what are the players around open data. Oh, okay. Say that the other application is developed using open data. Most of the data that we have available in this moment are open data, for instance, the maps. What are the players involved in open data? From my point of view, these are the main players involved in open data. local administration, developers, community developers, tourists, and citizens. Local administration offered to the tourists and citizens some open data in order to be transparent, in order to share different data, interesting data for tourists and citizens. And local administration offered these data to developers in order to make new apps, new applications, new products and digital services that can be used for the tourists and citizens. And when we are moving around the cities, we are essential. So if you download the application, we know how are you moving around the city, how long have you taken it, and some information regarding how you move around the city that the local administration can use in order to have new open data that can offer to the developers who improve the application, who offer to the citizens. This is an interesting circle, open data circle. I would like to show you how local administration can offer this data to developers and tourist citizens. This is a real example. We have La Palma. Palma has an open data web portal who offer to the tourists and developers and citizens different open data. Manlleu, Seville, and Granada. All of them offer to the citizens, the tourists, and developers very interesting data in order to develop applications that all the people can use. Most of them are very similar, and I would like to develop quickly how La Palma Open Data has. All of the data are grouped in different themes. For instance, geographic data, a city infrastructure, tourism, cultural heritage, public transport environment. They are open data, open geographic data. I would like to share with you that 95% of the data has a special location, they have a spatial component. And no open geographic data are trades and hostels. In other area in this web page, you can see a link for the developers that you can use this open data and a license of Esri that you can develop different applications using this open data or enrich your data. And the other one, I would like to share with you different applications that different developers are using and you have available in this landing page. For instance, transport, public transport, mobile coverage, and astronomic viewer, and trails. That's all.
Thank you very much, Antonio. So I mostly work with governments, right? And when we raise the point of the need to engage much more with new forms of collaborations with the private sector ranging from well-established big companies to small developers, geeks, like one-person small companies that actually can help producing value within the touristic industry, for instance, governments are always kind of skeptical that that can actually happen in a fruitful way. Given your wealth of experience from the private sector perspective and now in relation to open data, what do you think can be done? What are still the remaining challenges to foster these new forms of collaborations that need to bring the different partners that you mentioned together to make something valuable out of open data?
If you mind, I would like to change to Spanish because most of the people here are talking in Spanish, if you don't mind. Efectivamente, como comentaba.
Well, indeed, as you said. Indeed, as you were saying, it is a fantastic opportunity with open data that we offer to developers and to citizens and tourists. This is good to develop products, apps, and digital services. This is data that you can use. You can use that you can use, or you can generate your own models to enrich the data. So you can enrich the data based with this information, because you have other sources as well, and develop your service or app. But there has to be a way of offering data, this data. As I said earlier, the easiest way and universal of sharing data is through portals, websites where you have clearly defined the data sets, the open data sets that you're offering. They have to be easy to find, they have to be compatible, they have to be used, you have to use them and reuse them, and also in addition you have to be able to share them with other people. I spoke about the case of La Palma, Sevilla, Mañeo. These are open data portals that offer this open data for people to develop apps and go into new business models that the governments and local administrations are developing and using and providing to developers. Another question: innovative models, business models. Quite often, there's things that come up that become a barrier. For example, GDPR that was adopted across Europe. Can that place restrictions to enable the development of innovative solutions? From your point of view, how is this being managed? Privacy, security, legal framework, etc., even copyrights, to put this up and running to protect people as per the new framework. And how are you managing this? And how are you finding a balance here between the need to protect and the need to not raise barriers to development? Well, GDPR is a European law that came into force just recently, and what it ought to do is not to place restrictions, but rather that your private information doesn't flow. But what it is trying to do is to facilitate open data, flow of open data. In Spain, for example, red.es has data that they can share, so you can generate new business models and also generate an economy that's more sustainable, and obviously to add value to society. Ultimately, what we're all after is to improve the experience of our visitors, our citizens. And the best way to change that experience is to understand what the citizens do, what do tourists do, be able to share experience and profile. So we can offer customized products and services. Open data gives us that opportunity. GDPR, in my way of seeing it, is going to help us. It's going to help us more than raising barriers. It's actually going to help us to develop this.
Up very strongly is that data need to be of a certain type for value to be created within the touristic industry to create smart destinations. And I've been working for many years in relation to open data with different communities, and quality of data, for instance, or what the valuable data change from different communities. There are communities that create a certain type of value for which the data they need is of a certain kind, and the data changes in terms of type of data needed for across communities. So if we look at the creation of smart destinations and smart solutions in the touristic industry through open data, what do you think should be the prioritization of our efforts to make sure that the data we provide for value to be created in this environment is the right type of data?
Thank you, Barbara. And first of all, thank you also to the organization for inviting us to be part of this panel. There are three concepts I would like to put emphasis on, and they are really basic for creating the notion of a smart destination and the kind of things you have to bear in mind when bringing the vision of a platform you have to put in place, either in regions or cities, to really materialize the concept of a smart destination. One of them is right-time or real-time open data. This is a fundamental change in our way to look at the perspective about open data. Open data so far, we have to face this, has not delivered the promise when talking about creating the kind of applications people are looking for. And that was mostly because open data platforms and technologies so far were very much focused on static and historic data. And yes, there are interesting things and studies and so on you can develop on top of static or historic data. But really, what you want to do is to change the experience of people, the daily life of people, while they move in the city, while they are doing things, meeting people, meeting places. And this requires access to real-time open data. How this is implemented ends up leading to the concept of APIs, application programming interfaces, which I don't want to get into the details, but the same way for a writer, it is important to have the typing machine or the laptop to write their books. For a programmer, APIs are essential. It's how they develop the programs. And therefore, if you want people and the wide community of developers to create applications for smart destinations, which is at the end of the day what people consume in their smartphones and so on, you have to provide APIs and APIs for getting access to this right-time open data. Cities, regions who want to become smart destinations have to transform themselves into platforms which provide standard APIs for getting access to real-time data describing what is going on now in their cities. Standards is very important, and I think good news is with initiatives like FiWare, which has been widely and growing in adoption in different cities around the world, and currently at ETSI standard organization, we are bringing this API for how to offer in a standard way this right-time open data. Second concept is about common information models, because we have to talk about the same language. The way you describe a street, the way you describe a building, beach, whatever place, has to be based on common attributes that are the same from one city to another, from one destination to another. Otherwise, again, this becomes really a barrier for developers. And there is one very important concept that you all have to keep in your mind if you want to develop the notion of the smart destinations in your places, which is you have to attract developers. You have to bring them what they need. And they need an API, they need data models. If you don't provide this, they will not deliver. And this has to be common and standard for all the cities. And this is the big effort in which put really emphasis. And I think United Nations, the World Bank, and European Commission in Europe have the responsibilities to put in place the programs that stimulate not only the definition of such standards, but also the piloting, the implementation of such standards. The third last concept, which is also very important, is that of bringing support to the data economy. Open data has to evolve. It's not necessarily all about free data. There is a lot of data that is out there describing what's going on. And it might belong to private organizations and companies. And you have to bring the stimulus for them to release that data. How? Maybe, I mean, money always works, which is put the incentives for them to offer their data. They don't necessarily need to be the providers of the applications. You want them to release their data because there will be other third parties that can develop those applications. But you have to bring a model where some of the data can be monetized, some other data can be for free. There will be different business models with different parties involved, and we have to bring a platform based on standards that allows all these kinds of innovative and disruptive business models to emerge.
Thank you very much. That rings bell for me related to the demand of data reusers. Because you're right, in many instances, the main focus has been on putting data on a portal with an approach that oftentimes was to have data that ended up being static and being historic. And the more, if we listen to the demand, for instance, of the people that in this context are reusers of data, that's not what they need. So what do you think, based on your experience, what is the main challenge for administrations, even local administrations, to be able to reach out to the demand, to reach out to the developers, to bring the developers on board? Hackathon events are some good examples to actually connect the community of reusers, but they can't be, oftentimes they're like, they happen once a year or a few times a year. So what's the main challenge in relation to creating this platform for a constant exchange that brings the demand in and therefore enable to provide the data that the demand needs?
Collaboration is essential. This is one aspect, and sometimes the cities or the countries and so on not, it becomes a bit difficult to collaborate. So you have to bring sometimes leadership to. One thing that we have found that works pretty well is to try to engage and bring into working groups those cities or those countries that actually have resources, budget, ideas, vision, and they want to really move into execution. And then bring them together and bring them support. There are a number of initiatives. I think I would like to mention two. One is in the case of cities, the Open and Agile Smart Cities initiative. That was an initiative that was born by cities that say, we have to start making some decisions. Let's stop about making PowerPoints, all explaining what a smart cities is and so on. We have to agree on what is going to be this common standard API, what could be a first set of common information models, bringing support to development of applications that can move from one city to another, because cities cannot themselves be a market, a sustainable market for application developers. They are not enough. We have to create a market. This is very much linked to the notion of digital single market that the Commission is trying to promote within Europe. We have to create the basics for creating a digital single market for development of, in this case, smart destination solutions. How you can do this? By means of bringing standards at platform level that will allow a developer, a startup, to say, okay, I can invest in creating this app. Maybe I will not sell it to the first destination, the second destination, but there is a large market where my application can be ported. If we do not make this happen, then we will fail.
Thank you. You asked already the second question I'd like to ask you, which is how to foster what kind of good examples of collaborations between cities existed, because I agree that the local levels and the cities can be an engine of great value creation in this environment. So I think it's the role that you mentioned before that international organizations can also have in linking and networking. And, you know, as we talk about data portability, I really like this concept of services interoperability and portability across cities. Thank you very much. I'd like to invite Martin now to share with us briefly his experience in this domain.
So at Outdoor Active, we're about 100 passionate people, passionate about the outdoors, and the cathedral that we're building is a digital home for outdoor enthusiasts. So people that like to go hiking, cycling, ski touring, we try and give them all the information they need to do the planning and to support them while they're out there exercising. And we do this by working together with a couple of hundred tourism destinations. We support them to actually get all the digital information that's relevant for tourists, to digitize these information and to make them accessible. And this is what also got me here, because in theory this would all work perfectly, but in practice, and I'm very passionate about outdoors, of course, myself. I go hiking with the family, and there's hardly any weekend where it doesn't happen that we have planned a trip to a nice waterfall, and then we come there and the track is closed. And it's disappointing. The kids are crying, and these experiences, they happen again and again and again. There's opening times that are out of date. There's information that's either not there or that's just incorrect, that's missing important bits. And I think this is what we got to change. So we talked a lot about smart data. In practice, my experience is that there's a lot of dump data out there today. And this is what we need to change. Also innovation. You just mentioned the applications that developers need, the tools that developers need. There's companies out there that provide these tools and these technologies like Amazon. But if you ask Amazon, can you recommend a nice family walk for me for my for the upcoming weekend in Oviedo? The answer you will get is probably going to be very disappointing, because it's quite likely that Amazon doesn't know about the hiking tracks in Oviedo. So how can we change this, and why is this happening? So those of you who followed the presentation from Massimo, the fantastic talk he gave yesterday about the remote control and how we're just going forward and backward. To make it even worse, sometimes it feels like we're just sitting in our chairs, in our comfortable chairs, and we do this. We do what we've always done, and it doesn't require much energy, doesn't require much effort. But if we really want to innovate and change things, we got to get outside of this comfort zone, and this requires blood, sweat, hard work. You don't win the world championships without going to the extreme and practicing really hard. And it's the same if we want to change something in our industry. So for the last few years, our observation was that a lot of times it seemed that the tourism industry is following things, following trends. There's a lot of buzzwords that come up, and there's consultants and businesses and everyone talking about these things, and it's always about what you can do next, but very rarely people think about why should we do something about it. What should be the reason? What's the reason that why we should take up some of these technology and do something with them? There's a very popular big vision that John F. Kennedy put out there to put a man on the moon, and I think what we need for the tourism industry is to think about what's our moonshot, what's our vision that can get collaboration in the whole industry, join forces, work really, really hard to achieve something which is going to be beneficial for everyone. And I think one vision that we could have is to create a digital data infrastructure, an open digital data infrastructure for tourism. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that. Every one of you probably read the books about information being the lifeblood of tourism, and I think we really need to get this lifeblood flowing. And what Jörn said with static data and dynamic data, I can absolutely support that and underline that. We need to get real-time data streams flowing, and to do that, we need to start digitizing information. So things like an alpine hut, we need to put that on the map. We need to create a point of interest representing that hut and putting all the information that's relevant to that. Or a hiking track, we need to put the geometry of the hiking track on the map. We need to describe the hiking track. Is it difficult? Is it, how long is it going to take, and things like that. If there's a track that's closed, we need to put that information out there. Like in the car when you drive, you get information about road closures through a standard, a TMC standard. Now, what kind of standard do we have in tourism for things like that? I don't know of any standard, but there should be a standard for that. So if you think about digital transformation, how is digital transformation going to work? I think we need, on one side, think about the local level and the regional level, the national level, and so on. And on the other hand, think about the different industries and what data, what information each of these industries should provide. And digital transformation is only going to happen if we put this together, if we collaborate, and if we network across the regional levels and the geographic levels, and also across the industries. And yesterday I was talking to someone about an inventory. So what we should do is maybe set up an inventory and have a look at in our destination. Do we have all data about museums, including opening hours, including price information, including whether it's accessible with wheelchairs and things like that? Do we have all the information about restaurants, not just on TripAdvisor? Do we as a destination have that information and make it universally accessible for everyone out there? And so on and so on. So just collect and think about what is the information that we need to support nice apps and nice technologies and things like that for tourism. And then think about where's this data coming from? What's the quality of this data? What's the availability today? And how can we change it to improve it? Not going into details about that, but smart destination data is a lot of effort. And this is just sketching out some of the aspects that you have to cover if you want to provide real good data. Data that developers can use to build an Amazon Alexa app to answer that question that I asked about the hiking trails for families on the weekend, considering the weather information and so on for Oviedo. And from a technical perspective, a professor at the SDI in Innsbruck said we should build an open knowledge graph for tourism. So without going into details again here, this is something where it's important to do this together, not as an island, as a region that does that for one place, and then there's another region doing something similar but different. We gotta have one common understanding. And summing it up, I think digitalization is just the top of the iceberg. What needs to happen is up here is to think about how can we connect the data streams, how can we collaborate. And on the top of the iceberg, I see the technical challenges, but below, and that's the main point as well, there are a lot of leadership challenges that we need to solve. And this is a quote which is often used for the hackathons because people have lots of ideas, but at the moment they have very little access to high quality digital information, not just for a specific small region where it's perfectly fine, but for the whole world. And if we think about what do we really need to solve, we need to have a user, and we need to have experiences, and we need to match these things based on, like a recommendation service could recommend specific services for a family for Oviedo, and the way that service would do that is to analyze the preference data of the user and to analyze the smart destination data and match that. And for the left side, we need trust that people have in companies and technologies where they provide their preference information. And on the other hand, we need leadership in tourism to build this open digital data infrastructure for tourism that is relevant and required for everyone who wants to innovate in tourism. There's a think tank that we're planning in September, and there's some projects going on about how to get this started. And I think a very important point is to be able to talk to you about this at the conference, because there's a lot of leaders here, I expect, and I think we need to work together and see how we can get this going. And this is the last slide that I want to put up. And this is coming back to the portals that you mentioned, the information portals. And I think it's good to have open data portals out there. And there's a lot of open data portals already. But we gotta look at how can we get real-time data streams into these portals, and how can we make sure that these portals connect on every level, that traffic data and tourism data work together, that regional data from Oviedo is accessible at a data level where we have a database of the whole world. Can we get a map of all the public toilets in the world together? They're very relevant for tourists. So we need all the public toilets in Oviedo and make sure they're accessible at an open data platform for tourism, which is covering the whole world. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. As you said, we have many leaders here, right? And I think you raised the key point of leadership being a key ingredient for this to work. So based on your experience, if you were to identify a couple of characteristics that the right leadership needs to have, what would this be?
I think, first of all, courage, because what we quite often observe is that when you talk to people, people are really interested and they say, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And that's about it. And then nothing happens because you need to take a risk to actually do something which is outside of your comfort zone. And I think this is a major aspect of the kind of leadership that I think is required to actually make it happen, to actually develop such a open data platform or an open digital data infrastructure for tourism together. So I see this as a core challenge that all of you can help to solve.
And just a small follow-up question. Based on your experience, do you see a difference between the private sector and the public sector when it comes to having the right leadership?
Yes, I do. The private sector is obviously very fast, but driven by looking at what is in there for me. And quite often this gets you to a point where you have innovation going. We saw an example yesterday about the Google Local Guides program. It's a really innovative application. It's a really innovative program, great idea. The only problem is the data is not available as open data. It's real good data that's being generated here, but it's not open data. And so I think, again, the kind of leadership we need is a bit of spirit of, moving fast and taking risks, what the private sector is doing, and moving forward, pushing things, but then also thinking about what's the overall benefit for our industry. And bringing this together, I think there's not that much leadership out there which has the required skills to bring this together. And I think this is something that we should work on and help each other to get to that point.
On top of this, to mention an initiative that is in place, is starting now, but I think could be a very good reference. And it's an initiative by the European Commission. There is a program called Connecting Europe Facility. This program, which is one of the largest programs driven by the European Commission for implementing the concept of digital single market, they bring the concept of what they call CEF building blocks. And these are technologies that are recommended to implement the kind of infrastructures that can work across member states for supporting digital services. And one of the components that has been recently adopted as a CEF building block is the fiber contact broker technology, which allows public administrations like cities and so on to explore real-time open data. And they are going to work on how to connect or integrate that technology with the European data portal. So in the very near future, there will be a European data portal that will not only publish static historic open data, but also real-time open data from all cities and public administrations. And this is a model that can be easily exported to other regions.
Maybe I throw in another example of a project that we wanted to initiate together with people who are also passionate about open data, trying to push open data. So we approached the government of Bavaria with an idea to create an open data infrastructure for tourism in Bavaria. And from the first time that the idea was brought out there until a project was finally set up, took about 2 years. So I think it's good that the project is there now, and we look forward to do something. But we got to speed up these things, and I think we have to look at the policy frameworks that help us, and that initiative that you mentioned could be something to accelerate this, to push these initiatives forward and to get things going.
Thank you very much. I actually would like to thank all of you because we stayed within the time, even if we started late. So thank you very, very much. I think we have heard many interesting points concerning how to make the open data for smart destinations more inclusive as a system, how we have a story to tell, but we have to be able to tell this story to make our destinations attractive, how efforts to increase visualization practices to boost the participation and the connection with the role of the intermediaries that can help connect different parts of the ecosystem can be a vehicle to create new business models that bring value to all the different parts of the system, the ecosystem, and to the different communities. That requires a vision, though, that connects also to the demand. It requires an infrastructure that needs to be open and needs to be providing data, which is a type of data that is needed, but oftentimes is not the right one. And all this needs to have a leadership in all environments that is capable to support these efforts. This because at the end, we want to bring a better experience to all the people who are part of the touristic industry, which means it's all of us, as all of us are tourists in a way and consume the great product that we can produce. Certainly, I run marathons, I like Grenada, I like hiking, I like open data, and I like traveling smart, so I was in the right panel. I thank you very, very much, and please join me in applauding the panelists for their intervention. And I think we cannot better finish this session with a video on the hackathon event, if I understand, that took place a couple of days ago, that I think is going to be produced now. Gracias a todos.
Thank you all very much.
Que ha empezado desde ayer por la mañana, que tuvimos que presentarnos todos aquí y básicamente nosotros no éramos un grupo ni teníamos un idea en concreto para desarrollar, sino que empezamos todo desde cero. Fue muy difícil a la hora de desarrollarlo todo porque teníamos que desarrollar todo, crear un modelo que pudiese generar.
I'm very sorry, we're not getting a direct feed from the video. We cannot translate. Apologies from the booth.
Web que consumiera datos, tanto de aplicaciones de servicios como Mi Nube, Amadeus y demás, para que pudiésemos consumir y generar, digamos, una respuesta beneficiosa o sostenible a los viajeros. Creemos que es una oportunidad para ver las potencialidades que tienen los datos abiertos de generar desarrollo de aplicaciones o generar toma de decisiones a la hora de crear o generar ciudades inteligentes. Sí, sí. Repetiríamos, por supuesto. Por supuesto, repetiríamos una y otra vez.